I thought I was coming home to a quiet night with my wife. Instead, I walked into a lie so deep it made me question everything: my marriage, my past, and even myself. What I uncovered that night changed my life forever. My trip didn't begin the way I had expected. I was scheduled to attend a conference in Minneapolis on Thursday and Friday, but something felt off. Normally, whenever I had to travel, there was a warmth in my send-offs, a certain tenderness I had come to expect. My wife, Martha, had always made sure I left with good memories to carry me through my time away. In the past, she would even take a half day off just to see me off properly. But this time, her goodbye was reduced to nothing more than a quick kiss before she headed off to work. It was subtle, but I felt the difference. Before I go any further, let me introduce myself. My name is Ava Bajar, though most people call me Evan. I'm 49 years old, and for the past 24 years, I've been married to my wife, Martha. We have two wonderful children, Ross, our 22-year-old son, and Amelia, who recently turned 20. At exactly 3 p.m., my journey officially began. I left work and headed straight to the airport, giving myself plenty of time before my scheduled 6 p.m. flight. I've always made it a habit to arrive early. Nothing stresses me out more than the thought of being late and missing my plane. This time was no exception. Everything went smoothly, and I found myself waiting patiently for the much-anticipated boarding call. But luck wasn't on my side that evening. The flight coming in from Minnesota had been delayed due to worsening weather conditions. A snowstorm was brewing, and it posed a serious threat to our flight path. After what felt like an eternity, though in reality, it was a 45-minute delay, we were finally given the green light to board. Once we were in the air, I settled in, expecting an uneventful flight. But about 30 minutes in, I noticed something strange, a barely perceptible tilt to the left. At first, I brushed it off, assuming it was just a minor course adjustment. But then it became clear. The plane wasn't adjusting its route, it was making a full U-turn. The confirmation came moments later when the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Due to the severity of the snowstorm, landing in Minneapolis was no longer an option. We had no choice but to turn back. And just like that, my journey came to an abrupt halt before it even truly began. Once we touched back down, I found myself right where I started, on solid ground, with an unsettling feeling in my chest that had nothing to do with the flight itself. I rushed over to the airline's check-in desk, determined to rearrange my travel plans for the following morning. Thankfully, the staff was understanding, and with a stroke of luck, I managed to secure one of the last available seats on the next flight out. Though I felt the sting of defeat knowing I wouldn't arrive at the conference as planned, I remained resolute in my decision to attend. As I settled into a chair near the terminal, a flicker of hope returned. Without wasting any time, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number of my contact in Minneapolis. I needed to let him know about my delayed arrival. Speaking with as much professionalism and regret as I could muster, I explained that I wouldn't be able to make it until the following day. Just as importantly, I left a detailed voicemail for my boss, ensuring he was aware of the unexpected change. Once those calls were made, I instinctively dialed home, eager to hear Martha's voice, a familiar comfort after an exhausting evening. But as the phone rang unanswered, a strange unease settled over me. It was a little past 8 p.m., and when I pulled into the driveway, I immediately noticed something was off. The house was dark, and more unsettlingly, Martha's car was nowhere to be seen. I tried to reassure myself. Maybe she had stayed late at work or decided to grab dinner somewhere nearby. With our youngest off at college, the house had felt emptier lately, but this felt different. Something about the silence was heavier than usual, almost eerie. Leaving my luggage in the car, I carefully stepped inside. That's when I heard it, voices drifting from the living room, murmuring in the dimly lit space. My breath caught for a moment, my mind scrambling for an explanation. But as I moved closer, I realized the source: our television. It had been left on. That detail struck me as odd. I distinctly remembered turning it off before leaving that morning. The only logical explanation was that Martha had come home at some point. I picked up the remote and clicked the TV off, plunging the house into complete silence. Then, with growing unease, I began searching for any sign of her. Room by room I checked, calling her name now and then, hoping for a response. But the house was empty. No note, no message, nothing to explain her absence. With each passing minute, the anticipation gnawed at me, feeding an anxiety I couldn't shake. Where was she? And why did something about this whole situation feel wrong? I called Martha's mobile, waiting patiently as the phone rang. After several attempts, she finally picked up. "Hello, darling," she greeted me warmly, her tone light and affectionate, as if everything were completely normal. Hearing her voice, I felt an instinctive sense of relief. "Hi, honey. Where are you?" I asked, expecting a casual response, something reassuring, something familiar. It was a question I had asked countless times over the years, never with suspicion, only with genuine care. "Where else?" "At home watching TV," she replied effortlessly. Her words stopped me cold. I stood there, gripping my phone, staring at the dark and empty house in front of me. The weight of exhaustion from the long and frustrating travel delay pressed down on me, making it difficult to think clearly. Just moments ago, all I had wanted was to come home, find comfort in my wife's embrace, and enjoy a quiet, intimate night together, something simple yet meaningful. After a day of setbacks, I had convinced myself that at least I had this unexpected chance to spend the night in my own bed, next to the woman I loved. And yet, in the span of 30 seconds, that contentment was stripped away, replaced by a creeping sense of unease. Instead of returning home to a devoted wife after 24 years of marriage built on love and trust, I found myself standing in the middle of a deception I hadn't seen coming. She wasn't home. The realization hit me like a cold slap to the face. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation, but her words lingered, echoing in my mind. For a brief moment, my thoughts drifted to a memory from years ago, our 20th wedding anniversary. I had gone to great lengths to surprise her with a cruise, enlisting the help of her boss and her parents, carefully constructing a web of little white lies to keep the secret intact. For an entire month, I had orchestrated an elaborate scheme, meticulously controlling every detail. Back then, it had all been for something beautiful. A joyful deception. A celebration of our love. But this felt different. I swallowed hard and, without thinking, dialed my daughter Amelia's number. If something was wrong, if there was some emergency I wasn't aware of, surely she would know. She picked up quickly, her voice light and unbothered. "Hey Dad. What's up?" "Hey sweetheart," I said, keeping my tone even. "Have you talked to your mom today?" There was a brief pause. No, not really." "Why?" A strange sensation settled in my chest. "Just wondering." "No reason." I could feel Amelia's curiosity on the other end of the line. "Is everything okay?" she asked, the concern in her voice subtle but present. I forced out a chuckle, trying to mask the growing pit in my stomach. "Yeah, of course. Just checking in." We exchanged a few more words before hanging up, but my mind was already elsewhere. Martha wasn't home. She wasn't with Amelia. And yet, she had just told me, without hesitation, without even a moment of hesitation, that she was sitting in our living room watching TV. Why would she lie? And more importantly, where was she? I sighed and said, "Well, she's been acting a little strange lately, and I thought maybe she was planning some kind of surprise, maybe something for my 50th birthday?" Amelia let out a light-hearted laugh. "Dad, no, not yet. Didn't we just celebrate your birthday last month?" Her casual response left no room for doubt. There was no secret party, no hidden plans, just the cold reality that Martha had lied to me. Accepting that I wouldn't find any answers from my daughter, I wished her good night and ended the call. But the uneasy feeling gnawed at me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just out running errands or having dinner with a friend and didn't think much of it. But that explanation didn't sit right with me. Martha wasn't just vague, she had flat out said she was home watching TV. Why would she lie about something so simple? As I sat in silence, my thoughts drifted to my best friend, Daniel. A part of me considered calling him for advice, but I hesitated. Daniel had gone through a brutal divorce just 2 years after landing his executive position at a prestigious firm. Financially, he was thriving, but at the cost of deep loneliness and heartbreak. He had once told me, with a bitter chuckle, that all the money in the world couldn't replace the warmth of a family. The memory unsettled me. Martha and I had spent years raising our 2 children together, supporting each other through every challenge. With Amelia still in college, there were responsibilities we both carried as parents. Would she really risk throwing everything away? I shook my head, forcing myself to stay logical. Maybe I was letting my imagination run wild. After all, our physical connection had faded over time, age, stress, and the weight of our daily lives had undoubtedly played a role in that. Could it be that she was simply avoiding a difficult conversation? Was she just tired of confronting the fact that things weren't the same between us? But even if that were the case, why lie? There was one way to get an answer. Picking up my phone, I dialed Martha's direct work number. My heart pounded as I waited for her to pick up, the ringing stretching longer than it should have. And then, something inside me shifted. No, this couldn't be happening. I had always believed in seeing the best in people, choosing to focus on kindness rather than suspicion. I never thought of myself as someone who would jump to the worst conclusions. But now, against my will, my mind began filling in the blanks. Could she really be betraying me? The thought sent a chill through me, one I couldn't shake. My mind searched for a rational explanation for something, anything, that would make this all make sense. Then, another possibility crossed my mind. Maybe she was with her sister, Nadia. For a moment, the idea offered some relief. But then reality set in. Martha and I had grown distant from Nadia and her ex-husband, Mike, over the years. Once we had been incredibly close, bonded by shared history and deep trust. But things had changed. And if what I feared was true, if Martha was with Nadia for the reason I was beginning to suspect, then the fallout would be devastating. Not just for me but for everyone involved. And that realization made my heart ache in a way I hadn't felt in years. I knew without a doubt that if Mike ever found out about Nadia's infidelity, he wouldn't hesitate to throw her out. Their marriage would collapse in an instant, and the weight of that destruction would fall squarely on my conscience. Was I really prepared to be the catalyst for such a drastic upheaval? Before I could fully process the implications of my next move, the sound of the front door opening pulled me from my thoughts. Martha had returned home, and from the sound of it, she wasn't alone. Clutching her phone tightly in her hand, she stormed into the room, her face a mix of anger and urgency. "That bastard," she muttered through clenched teeth. It was clear she felt an immediate need to call Nadia and tell her everything, to warn her, to confront her, to demand answers. But before she could act, I reached for her phone, gently taking it from her grasp. "Let me handle this," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This is my responsibility." Martha hesitated, doubt flickering across her face. "Are you sure this is the right thing to do? What if—" she trailed off, uncertainty creeping into her tone. I met her gaze and nodded with certainty. "Yes, I'm sure. Nadia deserves to know the truth." Before I could say another word, the phone rang. It was Mike. Without hesitation, I answered. "She's been cheating on me, hasn't she?" His voice was cold, devoid of emotion. I swallowed hard, knowing that once I confirmed it, there would be no turning back. "Yes," I said simply. Silence hung between us for a long moment. Then his voice cut through like a knife. "I hope she knows she just lost everything." And with that he hung up. Martha stood beside me, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, her voice laced with both sorrow and admiration. Overwhelmed by emotion, she reached for me. "Please, just hold me." I pulled her into my arms, rocking her gently back and forth, offering what little comfort I could in the wake of the chaos we had just unleashed. After a long moment, I finally voiced the question that had been nagging at me. "Do you think they should?" Before I could finish, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Nadia. "What should I do? Where should I go?" Her voice trembled with panic. "Can I come to you?" I took a deep breath, already knowing my answer. With regret but unwavering resolve, I replied, "No, Nadia. You have to figure this out on your own." On the other end of the line, she inhaled sharply, stunned by my refusal. "I can't believe my own sister would turn her back on me," she murmured, the disbelief heavy in her voice. Martha remained silent, her expression unreadable. But deep down we both knew, this wasn't about turning our backs on family. This was about consequences. I turned to Martha, my mind racing with the weight of what had just unfolded. "Martha," I asked carefully, "what do we say to a cheater who wants to come stay with us after betraying her husband?" She hesitated, as if unsure how to respond. Then, with quiet determination, she answered, "We tell her exactly what she is, a deceiver." I nodded in agreement. "Exactly." But then, something shifted in Martha's expression, an unease, a flicker of doubt. "But, you said Mike cheated on Nadia too," she murmured, almost as if she were trying to justify her sister's actions. I exhaled, choosing my words carefully. "I never said Mike actually cheated. I just brought up a hypothetical situation, one where he picked up a woman at a bar. I used it as an example, not a fact." She was quiet for a moment, absorbing what I had just said. "Then let me ask you this," I continued, my voice steady. "How would Mike's betrayal, if it were real, be any different from Nadia's?" Martha swallowed, shifting uncomfortably. "Well, Nadia is my sister," she admitted, her voice laced with hesitation. That was it. The double standard. I wanted to push the conversation further, but before I could, my thoughts drifted elsewhere. A moment ago, I had been standing here, caught in the whirlwind of Nadia's scandal. But now my mind was racing with another question, one that sent an eerie chill down my spine. Where had Martha really been tonight? A part of me hesitated to go down that road. Did I really want to know? But deep inside I already did. I recalled a time when I used to pick up Nadia's children from a certain address. Maybe I still had her contact information saved somewhere. If I could find it, I could confirm her whereabouts. Instinctively, I reached for my phone, prepared to scroll through my contact list. But then, something else caught my eye, the Find My Phone app. A year ago, after losing my phone on a trip to New York, I had installed the app on both my and Martha's devices. At the time, it was just for convenience. Now, it had the potential to reveal something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. My hands hovered over the screen, my pulse quickening. Was I really about to do this? Or was I desperately searching for a simple explanation, one that I already knew didn't exist? I drove toward the estate where Martha was, the weight of anticipation pressing down on me like a heavy stone. In the distance, I could see the imposing iron gate blocking direct access to the grand property. My heart pounded, but I knew I couldn't simply drive up, ring the buzzer, and announce my presence. That wasn't the approach I needed to take. Instead, I carefully assessed my surroundings. Parking on the road nearby would be risky. It could attract attention, and the last thing I wanted was for Martha to be alerted to my presence before I had any real answers. I needed to be smart, discreet. As I sat there in my car, watching the estate from a distance, I felt my breath hitch at the sight unfolding before me. Nadia was there. That didn't surprise me. After all, I already knew she was staying with someone. What did surprise me, though, was the man standing beside her. He was well-dressed, confident, and unmistakably wealthy. His body language exuded arrogance, the kind of self-assuredness that came from power and money. Watching him, I had no doubt in my mind. Nadia had found herself another rich partner, likely as a way to shield herself from the financial consequences of her looming divorce. But what really unsettled me wasn't Nadia's new lover. It was the nagging thought in the back of my mind, the one whispering that Martha had somehow been pulled into this world, into a lifestyle I neither approved of nor wanted for her. And then as I watched, the scene took a turn that left no room for doubt. The man reached for Nadia, his hands moving over her body with a boldness that spoke of familiarity. She didn't resist. She leaned into it. I felt something inside me crack. Standing there, witnessing this moment of betrayal between two people who were supposed to be family, my mind spiraled. A storm of emotions raged inside me, anger, sadness, disbelief. For a fleeting moment, an impulse shot through me, to storm the house, to break down the door, to expose whatever was happening inside. The overwhelming mix of rage and heartbreak begged for an outlet, but logic intervened just in time. The reality was simple. Trespassing, confrontation, and assault would only land me behind bars. And what then? So instead, I sat in my car, my grip tightening around the steering wheel as the cold, unforgiving truth settled in. Denial could no longer protect me. This was real. And I needed to act accordingly. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out my phone and composed a message for Martha. It's been a crazy evening. Our plane got diverted to Chicago, but we're finally being sent home. They're not sure exactly when we'll land, but I should be back in about 30 minutes. See you soon. I knew she would see the message almost immediately. I also knew that a voice notification this late at night, completely unexpected, would undoubtedly stir anxiety and curiosity within her. Let her wonder. Let her feel that same gnawing uncertainty I had been drowning in all evening. And then, when I finally walked through the door, I'd see for myself if she could still lie to my face. I couldn't bear the thought that Martha, the mother of my children, might be in danger. No matter what emotions were surging inside me, anger, betrayal, heartbreak, I couldn't ignore the instinct to protect her. I decided to follow her, ready to step in if the situation demanded it. As I watched from a distance, my pulse quickened. My mind raced with possibilities. What if she was being manipulated? What if she was caught up in something she didn't fully understand? Or worse, what if she had willingly chosen this path? Despite the storm of emotions brewing inside me, I forced myself to think logically. Then an idea struck me. I quickly dialed 911, my voice firm and steady. I need to report a drunk driver, I told the operator. The car nearly crashed into mine, then sped up and started swerving all over the road. I provided the description, feeding them the details of the vehicle I had seen leaving the estate. I didn't know if it would amount to anything, but at the very least, it would cause some disruption. Maybe it would even buy me some time to process everything before confronting Martha directly. After making the call, I shut off my phone. I needed privacy. No distractions. Just space to sort through the whirlwind of thoughts flooding my mind. Sitting alone in the dimly lit house, I reached for a bottle of wine and poured myself a glass. As I stared at the deep red liquid swirling in the glass, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony, how for years I had believed that my love for Martha would mature like a fine wine, deepening with age, growing richer, more profound. But now, faced with the brutal reality of her deception, that belief felt naive. The truth had been staring me in the face all along. I had spent hours searching for a justification, an explanation that would make sense of it all, but deep down I had known. Maybe I had always known. For years, I had devoted myself entirely to our life together. While Martha had socialized, built friendships, and maintained connections with colleagues, I had always prioritized family. Sure, I attended mandatory work events, the annual Christmas party, the occasional company dinner, but beyond that I kept to myself. I never lingered after hours, never sought companionship outside of my marriage. The number of times I had spent an evening out without Martha in the past 10 years could be counted on one hand. But now, the kids were gone. It was just the two of us. And now I was alone. Utterly alone. I had no one to turn to, no one to hold me up as I crumbled under the weight of this reality. A wave of grief loomed over me, threatening to consume me entirely. I knew that if I let it, I'd drown in it. I had to create distance, to pull away before the pain fully took hold. It wouldn't be easy. It would hurt like nothing else. But I had no choice. Because no matter what happened next, one thing was certain: I would always remember Martha. I would always remember the love I had for her. And at the same time, I would have to learn to live with the fact that she was no longer mine. I knew that no matter how hard I tried to move forward, one image would always haunt me: Martha in the arms of another man. I had to get out. Throughout my life, I had always been content with modest expectations. My parents weren't wealthy, but I was fortunate to grow up in a home filled with love and deep-rooted values. I had never needed extravagance to feel fulfilled. But now, standing at the edge of my marriage, I realized that for the first time, I needed something more. I needed freedom. I needed to reclaim the part of myself that had been lost in the years of quiet sacrifice and blind trust. But before I could truly move on, I had to say my piece. I sat down and poured my disappointment into a letter to Martha. By now, I knew that a conversation would be pointless. Whatever love had once existed between us had been drowned in deception. Still, I needed to release my emotions to make sure she knew exactly what she had done. Martha, I am heartbroken to admit that I now see you following in your sister's footsteps, down a path of recklessness, of betrayal, of loneliness disguised as freedom. Perhaps this is something inherited, a tragic legacy. By the time you read this, I will be gone. I am not interested in revenge, nor do I want explanations. What I wanted was the life we built, the trust we shared, and the love I thought was real. But that's all in the past now. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. After sealing the letter, I moved on to the practical steps of my escape. I went straight to the bank and removed my name from our joint account, severing the last financial tie that bound us together. When I walked out, I was carrying a cashier's check for roughly $250,000, the share of our savings that rightfully belonged to me. It was enough to start fresh, to rebuild elsewhere. By noon, I arrived at work, surprising my boss, who had expected me to be in Minnesota. When I handed in my immediate resignation, his confusion turned to outright disbelief. "You're leaving?" he asked, stunned. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "And I won't be coming back." Our relationship had always been more than just employer and employee. In fact, he only held his position because I had once turned down a promotion that would have placed me above him. At the time, it seemed like the right decision. Now none of it mattered. By afternoon, I hit the road, exhaustion weighing on me like a heavy chain. The adrenaline that had fueled my every move was beginning to wear off, leaving me with an overwhelming sense of fatigue. Around 8 p.m., I spotted an old roadside motel and pulled in. The place was run down, the kind of establishment where the neon sign flickered and the front desk clerk barely looked up from his newspaper. But for $60 a night, I wasn't expecting luxury, I just needed somewhere to rest. After checking in, I pulled out the disposable phone I had bought earlier. There was only one person I needed to hear from. I dialed Ross's number. "Hello?" he answered, confusion in his voice. "Who is this?" I hesitated for just a second before responding. "It's me, son." "Dad? What's going on? Why are you calling from a random number?" His curiosity was tinged with concern. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Ross, I need to talk to you about your mother." The words felt heavy, like a burden I had no choice but to pass on. I had shielded my children from the painful truth for as long as I could. But now they deserved to know. They deserved to understand that the woman we had all trusted, the woman who had been the center of our family, was capable of causing the kind of pain that could never be undone. I had no doubt in my mind, Nadia had played a role in this. She had dragged Martha into her world, into a way of life that I could never condone. But knowing that didn't change anything. It didn't lessen the betrayal or ease the pain. Amelia, always the one to speak her mind, finally broke the silence. Her voice was raw, filled with something between anger and sorrow. "How long has this been going on?" she asked. "How long have we stopped being enough for her?" I swallowed hard, trying to push down the lump forming in my throat. "The duration, the reasons, none of that matters anymore," I told her gently. "The only thing that matters is that I loved her. I trusted her with everything I had. And she broke that trust. Nothing else mattered now." I could hear the sadness in Amelia's breathing, the unspoken pain between us. I forced a reassuring tone into my voice. "Please don't worry about me, honey," I said. "I'll be fine." There was a long silence. "Are you going to talk to her?" Amelia finally asked. I exhaled slowly. "No. There's nothing left to say." But that wasn't entirely true. There was one last message I wanted delivered. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, someone I had known long enough to call a friend. When he answered, I got straight to the point. "When you see Martha, tell her I wish her a pleasant life," I said, barely restraining my disappointment. "And then tell her to go to hell." There was a brief chuckle on the other end. "Of course, my friend," he replied. "I'll make sure she gets the message. But I should warn you, that kind of personal service is going to cost you an extra $50. "Consider it a bargain," I muttered. The hardest conversations. Talking to the kids was the hardest part. One by one, I had to help them understand that this was final. That there was no fixing what had been broken. Amelia resisted the most. She wanted answers, explanations. Anything that could help make sense of why the woman who had raised her had suddenly become a stranger. Ross, though more composed, was struggling in his own way. He kept trying to rationalize it, to find some logical explanation that would make it easier to accept. But there wasn't one. And I wouldn't lie to them. "The truth is, your mother made a choice," I told them both. "She knew what she was doing and she knew the cost. I don't know if she regrets it or if she ever will. But that's not our burden to carry." It was a difficult pill to swallow, but they deserved honesty. Even when it hurt. Martha's excuses. Through the kids, I learned that Martha had tried to justify her actions. She had told them this was the first and only time she had ever done something like this. That it was a mistake, a lapse in judgment, a moment of weakness. To be honest, I found that hard to believe. She had admitted to them that her betrayal had been intentional. She hadn't been tricked or manipulated, she had known exactly what she was doing. That was what cut the deepest. It wasn't about passion or falling out of love. It was about choice. She had chosen this. And now she had to live with it. The final goodbye. I knew I needed to get away from all of it, from her, from the memories, from the weight of it all. But first, I had to make sure I wasn't being followed. I slipped out through a side door, my heart pounding. As I walked briskly to my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had memorized long ago. "Hi, Louise," I said when she picked up. "Remember when I told you about my ex-wife? Well, she's here. And I think she might try to follow me home. Just wanted to give you a heads up." Louise didn't need any further explanation. "Understood. Be careful." Ending the call, I took a deep breath. Then, with calculated purpose, I stepped into Martha's line of sight. I didn't hesitate. I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to know that I wasn't hiding, that I wasn't running. I was walking away. And if she followed? Well, I was ready for that too. After all these years, after the countless nights of anger, sadness, and betrayal, I expected to feel something: rage, bitterness, even a sense of triumph. But as I stood there listening to Martha, all of it faded. I had moved on. For a brief moment, the part of me that once loved her, the part that had built a life with her, felt a fleeting urge to comfort her. But it passed as quickly as it came. I had no more comfort to give. With a steady, unwavering voice I asked, "So, Martha, what do you want?" Almost 3 years of silence stretched between us, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely more than a whisper. I had to strain to catch every word. "I need to apologize," she said. "To tell you how deeply sorry I am for the pain I caused you. It wasn't you, it was me." I let her words hang in the air for a moment. Maybe there was a time when I would have clung to them, searched for meaning in them, dissected them in hopes of finding some kind of closure. But that time had passed. Closure wasn't something she could give me. I had already found it on my own. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Instead, my mind was already on something else, something lighter, something that finally felt like my life. The next day I called Louise, my voice filled with a kind of enthusiasm I hadn't felt in years. "I'll be waiting for you at the barbecue on Saturday," I told her. "Absolutely, boss," she said with a smile in her voice. "See you at the office tomorrow." The following week, my lawyer received the signed divorce papers. It was official. And just like that, I was free. Moving forward. Healing wasn't immediate, it took time. But I learned to move at my own pace. I rebuilt my life, reconnected with old friends, and made new ones. I even found companionship again. I formed close relationships, and while I had entered into something intimate with one woman, I kept it without heavy expectations. For the first time in a long time, I felt like me again. The weight of the past no longer defined me. And as I moved forward, I realized something important. I didn't owe Martha anything anymore. Not explanations, not confessions, not even the truth about things she would never know. There was something I had kept to myself, something I could choose to reveal or carry with me forever. I might never tell her. And honestly, that decision belonged to me alone. For the first time in years, I was in control of my own story. I had finally freed myself. A new chapter had begun. But not for long.